This sound was recorded on the 8th of June, 1960. Sister Rose Creet, medium Leslie Flint.
Communicator, Dr. Charles Marshall.
Why should you think there's anything the matter?
What you think, what?
Why should you think anything is the matter?
Well, light coming from underneath, light coming from the, what do you call it, tape recorder. I thought perhaps you might find it difficult, that's why.
Oh, light everywhere.
Yes. Can you see it, Doctor?
No.
You can't?
Doesn't worry me. It only worries you.
It doesn't worry you at all.
Not the slightest effect.
I can't yet understand where your voice is coming from.
What do you mean, where's it coming from?
I don't know.
In what way don't you know? How do you mean?
Are you right in this room, or are you ejecting your voice from somewhere and it's sounding here?
We are in the room, inasmuch that we are conscious of the room and we're conscious of your presence.
Oh.
But to us, the room is purely something which is registered inasmuch that it's consciousness of yourself. But to me, the room is non-existence as such. I'm conscious of it being a room and being in a room, chiefly through the conditions emanating from yourselves.
Oh.
I don't quite know how to explain this. Can I put it like this, that we are conscious of thought from your world, and the thought force from your world makes us in consequence conscious of you and your world and what it contains. In other words, we can enter into a more physical aspect of your life through you, or through your thought force. To you, if a room exists as it does, then we are conscious of the room as such. But actually, we ourselves are not the conversant, as it were, in the same sense as you are with your surroundings.
No.
It's chiefly through your thought that we're conscious of these things. To us, they are, in a sense, non-existent.
Can't you see
Because
it?
the simple reason that we are thinking and we are vibrating on a different plane or different wavelength, and that which is solid to you is no longer solid to us, but we are conscious of its solidity and reality through your minds. We know it is there, and for you a reality. To us it is only a reality through your thought force.
Can you see the objects in any room that you may happen
Once we enter into your condition and register in harmony mentally with you, we are conscious of the things around you.
Are you standing around here?
I suppose you could say we're standing, and yet we may not be conscious of having our feet on what you call your floor, but we're conscious of it through your self, and of course the medium in particular. But the room itself, which is solid and real to you, is not necessarily so to us. If we could come down onto your vibration and be in complete accord with it, then I suppose it would take on the solidity that since we cannot fully enter into your life or fully enter into your condition, it's never really solid to us. But we are conscious of it. I'm afraid that doesn't really perhaps fully explain or answer, but it's the only way I can think at the moment.
I wish I could picture you at this moment.
Well, I don't know that I don't see any reason why you shouldn't. Probably you can picturize me pretty well. As a matter of fact, sometimes I think you do. As a matter of fact, what is all this communication? What is all this making a contact, as you call it, but a realization through thought of contact, a realization of closeness, nearness, consciousness of the other. After all said and done, we are very real in our own condition of life. We are solid. We have a solidity which is far greater even than yours. But at the same time, when we enter into your life, we try as best we can to enter in such a way that you shall become conscious of this. Even though you're not sitting here, for instance, with an instrument, there are times when I feel sure that you must be very conscious, not only of my presence, but the presence of others. You may not be able to put out your hand and touch us, but in a much more important way, you are mentally in harmony and in tune, and you should be, and I think you often are conscious of presence. You may not be able always to accurately describe or depict what you sense, but it's there nevertheless. After all, thought is a predominant factor. Thought is. If it were not for thought, nothing could exist. Everything is as thought is.
Yes.
What do you not know? Then you'll explain, if you try and give me an idea what it is you want explained, I'll do my utmost to explain it.
That's all right, Doctor dear. I'll take it all in when I take.
But I thought it was pretty obvious. I mean, you know, everyone knows probably now in your world that nothing is really solid, it's only an illusion. After all said and done, it's the atmospheric condition, it's what is in the atmosphere, it is what is possible through the condition of life itself. Nothing is solid, it's all the time vibrating, it's clinging together, it's holding together, giving an appearance of solidity, but even that which seems most solid is alive, is vibrating, it's
Well, in that case, on your side, for instance, you say you're very solid there, but on your sphere of life, there is vibration all the time. It's not solid at all. You imagine it's solid, just the same as we do on the earth.
Of course, exactly. But as we vibrate in harmony with it, so are we solid with it. As soon as we start to move onto a higher plane of thought, we cease to exist with that which was once common and familiar and enter into a newer and a higher vibration which becomes solid and real to us. We create, as I think many a person must have tried to explain to
Yes.
you, we create our own condition. That is why there are many in your world who cannot possibly see eye to eye with you and others like you over this subject. They just are not vibrating in harmony with the thought force. They're not in tune, as you would say. They're not aware, they're not conscious of this reality, which to you is a reality, and to them it doesn't exist because they don't see it, they don't sense it, they don't feel it, they don't know of it. There are many things which one in your world does not know of as such, from the point of view of being solidified with it or conscious of it in that sense, as you would, for instance, something that is actually in your world in a material sense. But far more things exist outside your ordinary consciousness, and once you begin to realize that and begin to tune in and strive to meet it and to reach out to it, then it becomes a reality. These things are real, inasmuch as you are conscious of them.
Yes, it's only by learning on our side, for instance, that we can be conscious and understand the different things. I suppose on your side it's just the same. It's by learning, but how do you learn there?
How do we learn here?
You have to learn, don't you?
Of course we have to learn. But don't forget that we have many souls, many teachers, many individuals who come from different spheres or planes, make themselves known to us and become our tutors and help us to understand and grasp things. We have also people here who study nature as you understand nature, inasmuch that they discover, as you would say scientifically, science properly understood and properly applied, when it is allied to spiritual matters of a high order, is the greatest of all religions. What is religion? Religion is in a sense a loose term. Religion as you understand it in your world is something to do with God, and it gives you an understanding, or should give you an understanding of God's laws. That in itself is a science, and the highest form of science is knowledge, and knowledge is only gained by discovery, by attempting to find out, and experimentation. Science, properly understood, is more of a religion than that which you term religion in your world, which is often something which has never advanced very far and remains on a low level.
Yes, yes, that's quite right.
As science in your world develops and understands more of nature, understands more of man and what he is capable of, and what is in nature itself, and what can be drawn from it, and what can be used, and so on. Nature in its proper sense, properly understood, supplies all the answers. Gradually man is learning some of the answers and becoming wiser in consequence and more advanced. But then again we must also remember that those whom you call scientists often in your world, though they have often grasped much and used much for the good of man, they often use things for an ulterior motive or for the wrong motive, and in consequence brings chaos. You see, all knowledge is good if it is used in the right way and applied in the right direction, but so much knowledge is misused and half knowledge is bad. And of course in experimentation too, there's bound to be those who discover so much and still don't know the rest of the answer, and in consequence their little knowledge sometimes is dangerous, as you do have experience in your world of circumstances where science has discovered certain things, but to find out its effect they experiment, and sometimes the effect is dreadful.
Yes.
The whole point is that we are all, and that is to me the logical answer to life, that we are all on different stratas of being. We are all seeking, we are all in a sense experimenting with ourselves. We're experimenting every second of time, inasmuch that we're trying to learn to find out more of God's purpose, what God is, or what he is in himself. And in fact there are so many unanswerable questions that even we are still just trying to discover the answers.
I wonder if there is a certain given time for discoveries of certain things. I wonder if it is a gradual process and one cannot go any further until the time comes for them to go further.
I don't think that it's quite so. I think there's some logic in that, but of course we do get down to the basis that man can assimilate so much, whereas some can assimilate more than another because they are more progressed, or perhaps in this case because we know that they've had previous incarnations and that they have discarded much and learned more. In other words, I think that some who discover things which are of benefit and of which are of import to humanity, these are not new souls. Invariably they are old souls who are continuing from a previous existence and also carrying back too from their world of spirit knowledge which they've acquired and which they are anxious to put into practice and find out for themselves how much can be used successfully for the good of man. Nearly all the great ones who've lived in your life have all been old souls. They haven't suddenly become tremendous beings. They have become, over generations of time and many lives in many different conditions, come about to a high degree and in consequence have been able to leave behind great benefit to man. But we must remember, and I think it's vital to realize, that all advancement is of a mental nature. I'm not suggesting that the mental, spiritual progression or attainment isn't something that must be put into a practical sense. It must, because you see, all things are logic. We have to get down to logic in all things, even this world of spirit, which to some people is either non-existent, or if it does exist, is something that is very much of a biblical nature because of the readings they've had of the Bible over generations of time, and they forget that these readings are merely the mentality of very often people who were, even for their own day, not very advanced. The whole point is that though one may, by mental achievement and mental attainment, achieve a great deal of progression, it's still got to be a practical thing. It's not something that is purely of the mind, nothing more, nothing less. It is something which is logical, that has a logical basis. And when you have a logical basis, we are getting down to something that is tangible and something that is real. This is not something purely of the mind with no substance. True progression is full of substance, and it is a substance that gives it, you might say, life and shape and form. After all, that is exactly what happens with us. We mentally and spiritually progress, but as we mentally and spiritually progress, so we take on form and shape, and everything around and about us has its being and its reality, and it's in one harmony with us and we with it, and in consequence we exist and we live. We are, to a great extent, the product of our thought. We might say no more, no less. And according to man's spiritual achievement and advancement, according to the progression he's made, so he finds for himself certain conditions of life, certain different types of architecture, if you like, or different types of music. Music changes and varies according to the plane upon which you may be, the same as the architecture. In fact, as you might say in your word, in another comparison, so you find that in each generation you have changes according to man's predominant thought. And if the age is a good age, where the age is one of spiritual awareness or consciousness, you have greatness in music, you have greatness in architecture, you have greatness in art in all its various forms. In fact, you have greatness in life itself. But of course you do get variation, you do get change, and that is a good thing. Nothing must ever be static. There can be no life where a thing is static, where life is static. In fact, one would cease to have any being or existence at all. Life is constant change. One's body changes day in and day out. There are changes, subtle changes taking place, until death itself, which is the greatest change, when you find then that you discover that you are more than body, that you are something which is invincible, something that cannot be killed, something which is the very life essence itself, but you still discover that you have another body. In other words, you create by thought, unconsciously almost, if you like, but it's there just the same, that when you think, then you realize that you are force, that you are power, and you shape, and you are consciously or unconsciously almost, if you like, building shape, you're building form. You're building something which is to some extent solid and real, but it passes through stages. Nothing is static.
It's really a combination of thought, isn't it? It's not a single thought, for instance, from one particular person.
Oh no, thought is something which is fluidic. It's not something which is common to one person.
No.
You see, all life, after all said and done, every individual is a product of other people's minds.
Yes.
Minds of one's parents and minds of one's grandparents. That's where it says about even the sins of the fathers fall upon the children, which sounds to some people illogical and unfair and unjust. But it isn't so, because it's the same spirit that's running through, the same life force that's flowing through generations of peoples, and after all said and done, as you sow, so should you reap. And although we like to think, or at least there has been a time in most people's lives, and many on earth now, of course, when they think that when they are born, that is the beginning of their life. It, of course, is not the beginning of their life at all. And by a long, long way, it's probably only another experience of life. It's only another form of life. It's only another chapter, if you like, in the book of life, because we are not only our own. What we ourselves have created is what we have been created through the minds and the thoughts of generations of people. In the formative years of childhood, we take on a lot of the thoughts and ideas of parents and teachers and relations and friends, until, quite frankly, although you form something of an individual personality or character, really there's no such thing as an individual personality or character in a sense. There is something that you accept to be a personality, there's something that you accept to be a character, there's something that you accept, if you like, as Mrs. Creet or Mr. Brown or Mrs. So-and-so, but the point is that that individual is a product of innumerable thoughts, thoughts of others, thoughts that we have ourselves brought into being. We are the product of life, and life is not something that is individual, it is a collective thing. And that is the thing that exists beyond death. And although we have shape and form, and we have our own, to some extent, personality, we are still only, you might say, conscious because of other people's consciousness. We are all part of a tremendous whole. And when one suffers, so does another, in some shape or form. And so when we make mistakes, so do we by our mistake affect others, and they affect in consequence others. It is like something that can go on and on, which has no beginning and no end. It is the development, and it is the tremendous realization that one must have eventually of how we are all linked and bound together, and how actually the very fundamental thing that flows from us, through us all, is the very essence which is of God. And so we gradually evolve more and more to God, or become like Him. I do not refer to shape or form. I refer now to the infinite Spirit,
Yes.
which is the very life blood, you might say, of all humanity, where we lose in each other ourselves and discover that we are all in a oneness and an accord. And when we have this oneness and accord, we reach a stage of spiritual development where we can be considered to be living in a form, if you like, of paradise, because we are conscious of everything around and about us as being not only us, but all. We lose so much and gain much more in consequence. And when we, as you've often been told, that when we do develop, when we do grow beyond the static, because there is a form of static on earth in particular with many people, although actually in a sense we're not static, there is a form or appearance of being static. For instance, you get people say, oh, I don't know, I shall never change, I'm much the same now as I was so and so years ago, I should never do anything now, I'm too old, or my mind is too sort of set in my ways and so on, which is really in a sense not true. It's because you think wrongly. You think of yourself as from birth to grave. Even people who understand this truth, even yourself to some extent, which is all very human and natural, think like that. You think in regard to music, particularly, which is of course most important to you. You sit at the piano and you play a few bars and you feel annoyed and irritated. You say, oh, I should never play after. Not now, I've finished, I might have done 30 years ago, if, and so on and so on, and you get discontented. But actually it's a fallacy, because in your spirit, as I think Frederick's told you, and others may have told you, there is that realization that you are one with music. And when we talk about music, as Frederick will tell you much better than I can, we're talking about something which is of the mind and of the spirit, which is of harmony, which combines all the forces that are good. It is something which is put into a realistic sense.
Yes.
It becomes something which is tangible. Music is a very tangible thing. Not as to some people, it doesn't mean anything. When a person says to you, I don't like music, or I don't understand music, there's something radically wrong. I think you can say there that you've got someone who is obviously either a new soul or someone who has not progressed at all. In fact, the person who does not appreciate good music, who doesn't enter into the beauty and the harmony and the loveliness of it, doesn't realize and doesn't feel that it touches them in any way, there you have obviously someone who is very unprogressed.
Yes.
You see, the trouble with us is, as I've said so often, that we cannot and we do not know yet how we can, in language, whether it is English, Chinese, French, German, whatever language it may be, how we can put into words something which is purely of the spirit, something which is so essentially the essence. There is no way, I don't know of any way. We try desperately in words to form ideas. That's what it really amounts to. We try to implant in one's mind thought, but there are no words really that can really successfully do this.
No, I quite understand that.
And therefore so much must be perceived from within oneself, by sensing, if you like, by feeling emotion.
Yes.
And that's why Frederick always says that he can, I don't know if he said this to you, but he can always express much more in music than ever he can by words.
Yes.
And that's why I think he's trying to explain to you that many of the answers to problems can be found in his music, much more than even by him trying to explain it in terms and sentences and words.
Yes.
After all said and done, what happens? You get very low, very unhappy, very desperate, very down. You put on a recording, or you put on a record, or perhaps you sit at the piano, and somehow it speaks to you, it helps you.
Yes.
Some people, of course, in your world, if they're a religious turn of mind, if they're unhappy and downcast, they go to church. They pray. What is prayer? Prayer is entering into a state of oneness with the infinite, opening up, as it were, your mind to the thoughts which, though you do not always realize it, are around and about you, that are brought to you by ministering ones. After all, the Church glibly talks about the various archangels and the angels and the ministering angels, those that shall be given charge over there, and so on and so on. The Church talks about these things. Very few ever believe in them. But the point is that they do exist, and for every soul who is in need, who is in tribulation, who is anxious for guidance, it's there. There are those entities who love the peoples of earth, in particular those near and dear to them, obviously, who come close, draw to them, and endeavour to guide and to uplift, and if necessary, if they can, to inspire in some way, to change the course of life, to make it better, make it happier. We can't always do the things we'd like to do in a material sense. It's not given for us to do that. Perhaps it isn't even wise that we should be so aligned, but the point is that those who understand, as you understand, are in the fortunate position that they can receive inspiration, they can receive that comfort that can come and does come so often from us. We may not put it into words, we may not always be able to tell you exactly what you should do in a material sense, but we can bring about within you a change of thought, a change of outlook. We can take away the heaviness, we can bring a lightness and a realization that all is well eventually. It may not be for the moment, but the time will pass, changes will come, life goes on, and in the end all is swept away, and greater knowledge and greater wisdom and greater understanding is given. And as you mentally progress, as you mentally, as it were, tune in, as you become part of, more than you are, of the world of spirit, so you find a greater peace and a greater understanding, a greater solace. Nothing is lost. Often people look around and they feel that everything is against them. The world is going in the opposite direction to what they would wish it. Nothing seems tangible anymore, nothing seems worthwhile. All these feelings and emotions, which quite rightly and understandably people do feel, in a sense shows that because they feel like that, they are progressing, that they are, as it were, calling out for help, calling out for understanding, calling out for some one to give them some comfort and realization. Nothing is lost. We don't feel despondent. It is true, there are odd times when we feel a little despondent, but we take that from you. It's not something of ourselves. We take it from the people in your world who are feeling as they do. We therefore, because we are one with them, feel as they do temporarily, but it passes. We know that the weight will be lifted. We know that the light will shine and the darkness will disappear. You see, all life is constant change. It's constant, gradual, as it were, becoming conscious of that which is more real, more perfect. The imperfect is lost and the perfect comes and takes its place. And life is full of perfections. Your world is full of imperfections, with a perfection here and a perfection there, or what seems so. The whole point is that all life is a combination, but it is only when you reach the higher spheres that you lose the imperfections, and as you progress you perceive, and as you perceive you become, and as you become, so you are more and more conscious of the oneness with the rest of humanity, and you progress to a point where you can look back and you can see the realization for all things. You do not lose anything. gain. And you do not fear, you do not doubt, you are assured and you are comforted. But when you are in your world, sometimes you feel lost, you feel all around and about you is against you, or against all the things that you had hoped and desired. But this is only a temporary measure. It is all due to the thought forces around you, the forces which are not necessarily evil, but only, as it were, the forces of people who unconsciously do wrong, not because they want to do wrong, but because they have not yet discovered how to do better. We must always realize that one can do better, that one can achieve more, one can become more, but there is this form of life which causes disconcerting conditions for a time in individuals and collectively in humanity. We see the evils, but we can also perceive the good even in the evil, for in all things there is goodness. And when we perceive only the glimmer, and we help to develop it, not only in ourselves but in others, we are all beginning to form out of the darkness some glimmer of light which will eventually blaze the trail for others who follow behind us. I do not feel despondent about the present conditions in your world any more than I feel despondent about the individuals in it. Neither do I feel despondent about yourself as an individual, or the medium, or anyone near and dear to me, for I realize that each one of you are gradually growing a little wiser, a little more understanding. Each one of you are perceiving a little more illumination. Each one is stepping a little firmer, with a firmer step and tread towards that road which leads to the goal which we are all striving for. We're all on different stratas of being. We're all endeavouring to some extent. Some may be a little weaker than others, but we're all linked in the chain of human understanding and human progression. There's no need for fear. There's no need for doubt. Only to realize that we are gradually but surely evolving to a higher mental state, and as we evolve to that state of advancement, so we become more understanding, more patient, more tolerant, more wise, more considerate, and we bring about within ourselves subtle changes that illuminate our minds, and in consequence we become more and more perfected. But we can only become perfected slowly but surely. We cannot advance further until we are ready to advance, until circumstances make it so, for we are to some extent the controllers of our destiny. We may blame others, and to some extent we are what others have made us, but the point is that we have within ourselves a divine spark, which, given an opportunity, if we will but enable it to do so, will indeed become more than a spark. It will become a flame, a living flame of living reality and power and force, which will be so dynamic that we can achieve greatness, not only for ourselves, but for others who are less fortunate and less advanced. I don't get despondent, and I don't want you to be despondent. There's great cause for rejoicing, Rose, where you are concerned, and many others near and dear to us. I am happy in what we are doing. I'm happy in what you are doing. These things will come to pass gradually but surely. Be patient with yourself, and be patient with those around and about you, for each one of you, to some extent, are making progression. I must go.
Thank you, Dr. dear.
Love blessings from us all, and don't get despondent.
No.
God bless. Bye-bye.
Bless you.
Bye-bye,
Bye-bye,
Rosie. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, darling.
What a talk.
I see, what a long speech, Mickey.
Yes, well, you deserve it. Bye-bye.